And welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. So glad to be talking to Bally Sports Southwest. Brien Rea joins us. Always popular on the Spits and Suds program after his appearance last year. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, but I feel like I'm popular because of bad 90s pop culture references and have nothing to do with hockey, which is fine. Like, I'm okay with that, but I know context is important.
No, I understand. I understand. Let's talk about today's morning ice skate. Impressive. Chris Tanev first on the ice for your Dallas Stars.
That's big. I think we all kind of wondered, if he's hurt, or when DeBoer said in his press conference after the Seattle game that they needed to do more testing and see where things go from there. I think everybody looks at this and goes, man, he was the big pickup at the deadline. The numbers for what they've been doing defensively have been steadily declining since the All-Star break, but it seems like it's magnified ever since he joined the team at the deadline. So not that Chris Tanev has single-handedly turned defensive acumen around the Dallas Stars around, but they were clearly a better unit. Everybody seemed like they slotted into a comfortable spot for themselves. So the fact that he is ready to rock after that weird situation in Seattle, I think everybody is breathing a sigh of relief.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something that I was thinking, how can one player do that much? Because if you look at Jake Ottinger in the last few games, I mean, I think we all agree, terrific goaltender, but at the same time, since the presence of Tanev, clearly the whole defense has improved, and a good goalie can certainly, help. But I mean, a great defensive core certainly, can make the goalie better as well.
Yeah, I think with the defensive aspect of it, first of all, when you bring in Tanev, it does push everybody down the defensive depth chart a little bit, and not in a bad way. Look, Stanley Cup championship teams are loaded with depth, okay? And if you're a team that has a lot of depth, that means that players are going to either play fewer minutes or lesser roles, or things get shifted around in different ways. That's a good luxury to have. You want to have as many bullets in the chamber or clubs in the bag as you possibly can. So having Tanev specifically was huge for the defense. I do think also, because the Stars are one of the more veteran hockey teams in the NHL, combined with the ascent they've been building over the last couple of years, I also think when Peter DeBoer talks about locking down their details and playoff details and Stanley Cup details, like, we're within 10 games. We are within single-digit games now remaining in the season. I do think the group collectively as a whole realizes the opportunity that lies in front of them, and there's a maturity factor on this team that is well established now to say, okay, it's time to stop messing around. Not that they were goofing around or anything like that, but now is when we need to start putting ourselves in a playoff mindset and a playoff behavior, not the second to last game or the last game of the season or game one of the playoffs. It has to ramp up earlier than that. And then third, look, it was not the highest level of competition on the West Coast road trip other than the Vancouver Canucks. You still have to beat the teams that are in front of you, but I think we're going to learn a lot this week and, next week between the Edmonton game, the Colorado game, and the looming Winnipeg game as to where are they, not just defensively, but as a team trying to vie for a playoff spot or playoff seeding, and are they in a place where they are ready to take on the upper echelon of the league and make a Stanley Cup run.
It's interesting you say that about the schedule, because I completely agree, and I think Wednesday night will be a telltale sign. At the same time, then I see Colorado, and they lose to Montreal and Columbus, when they're fighting the Stars for first.
Well, yes, and Dallas has a game against Chicago before Colorado, and they still have St. Louis in the last game, and Buffalo. Like, there's trap games everywhere. I mean, there are trap games everywhere for all these playoff teams. Dallas, I thought Seattle at the end of that road trip might have been a trap game. They were coming off the emotion of clinching a playoff spot. It's the end of a long West Coast road trip. clearly I'm losing my voice out of my excitement for all this playoff hockey coming up. But they handled it well. I thought they played really well in the first period in Seattle, even though they didn't have the lead to show for it, and they finally broke the dam in period 2. So we'll see if they can maintain and continue to control play, do what they've been doing against whatever caliber of opponent. But yeah, the head-to-head games against Colorado and Winnipeg are big in terms of the Central Division. But outside of those, they have to get the points that are on the table for them because Colorado's not backing down. And if we're talking about the West overall, Vancouver's not backing down. And if we're talking about the President's Trophy, the Rangers might have the best powder puff schedule of any team near the top of the NHL. I think they've got like 5 of their last 7 games are home games and non-playoff teams. So there's a lot of points here that still mean a lot for the Stars.
I said the other day when I was talking with Sean, this personally is the most parity I've ever seen in the NHL. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, probably. Like, certainly in recent memory, I feel like within the last 7 years or 10 years, like I can't think of a time where there were. Boy, I haven't looked at the updated standings now, but entering that Seattle game, I believe like the top 7 teams in the league were all separated by 7 points. It was in like the top 5 were separated by like 4 points or 5 points. It's crazy, but I've said this on a few interviews over the last month. There's probably 7 to 8 teams. You look at them, they all have a bona fide, legitimate check mark next to them that makes you go, they could win the Stanley Cup because of that. But they all also have a question mark next to each of them that makes you go, that could be the one trapdoor or pitfall that undoes them in the playoffs on a run to the Stanley Cup. And so it may come down to matchups, honestly. It may come to purely who you get round by round. It does that anyway, but it might be magnified this year because of how wide open it's been at the top 7 or 8 teams, I think.
And on this podcast, Brian, you try to be candid with Stars fans, but at the same time, like I make the disclaimer, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. Would I be extremely disappointed if the Stars, say, lost to Nashville in the first round? Absolutely. But I also want to be frank with our listeners and let them know that that's not like the greatest upset of the century because you talked about like this depth that the Western Conference has. It's just, you're looking at right now potentially the top bottom teams being Nashville, either LA or Vegas. And those are 3 extremely good teams.
I think it's a fair expectation to say, listen, if they don't get to round 2 or get through round 2, it's a disappointing season. Once you get to the Final Four, all 4 teams have a legitimate case, usually. Some teams are more banged up than others, and that comes into effect. But if you get to the Final Four, if you get to round 3, it's a coin flip a lot of times for those 4 teams. If the reason I say getting to round 2 or through round 2 is whoever comes out, or like whoever finishes through round 1 out of the top 3 teams in the Central, either Dallas has to deal with Colorado or Winnipeg in round 1, or Colorado has to deal with Dallas, or whoever survives or avoids those other 2, they have to deal with them in round 2. Like it's brutal, the draw that you possibly have. I think Vegas might have done enough to get themselves into the 2-3 matchup in the Pacific. I don't know if they're going to slip back into the second wild card. But for a while there, it looked like, boy, whoever finishes tops in the West is going to get Vegas, or whoever finishes first in the Central is going to get it. Yeah, it's ridiculous the draw you may have, but because of the Central Division specifically, if Dallas won the Central and was able to get to round 2, okay, you have to deal with Colorado, who you haven't beaten all season up to this point. There's still 1 game remaining. Or you could have to deal with Winnipeg, who might be the Vezina Trophy winning goaltender. He's definitely going to be top 3 in Hellebuck.
Yep.
He may win the whole thing. that could absolutely change a series. But it's crazy, and I'm going to shift it back to the Central entirely. Winnipeg can't beat Dallas. Dallas can't beat Colorado, and Colorado can't beat Winnipeg.
That's
and
amazing.
I don't know if that'll sort itself out because they all see each other one more time, like maybe. But how do you predict trying to get through round one? Okay, sure. You could say the Stars, they should be expected to win their first round in that series. Round two and beyond is just completely in limbo, I think, right now.
Bosch tools are built for workers. Bosch's powerful hammer drill has kickback control to help work go more smoothly when you need it. The 2-in-1 impact driver and wrench quickly changes between bits and sockets, so you only need one tool instead of two. And the X-Lock grinder switches wheels up to 5 times faster than standard grinders when you need to change tasks in a hurry. Bosch tools take care of the job and you. Bosch tools, what hard workers deserve. Learn more at BoschTools.com.
Is there a player that when you're watching these games with Sevy that you guys just continue to look at each other and say, my goodness? And I'm going to take a guess that it might be Wyatt Johnston for you guys. In the 2 years, I can't count on my fingers like mistakes that I've seen him make that have really cost this team. I'm just so impressed. But is there another player that you guys just, in between periods when you're sitting there and they're feeding you, I think, caviar and other amazing items because of the TV budget, like what are you guys looking at each other and saying, wow, this player's pretty darn good?
Well, caviar is not in the budget, unfortunately. We're stuck with the filet mignons.
Okay. Got it.
I mean, let's be honest. That's substandard.
Yep,
but,
understand.
Yeah, so you took the low-hanging fruit in Wyatt Johnston. It's the answer for me right now, because I think the way that the season has gone, it's sort of been a different player or a different line for different segments of the season. I mean, there was a while there where the Duchesne line was arguably the best 5-on-5 line in hockey.
Amazing.
And that drifted off. There was a time where Wyatt Johnston went up to the top line, and that line was doing some stuff for a 4 or 5 game stretch. And then obviously he went on his heater when Logan Stankoven came up as well. The other guy right now is Jamie Benn.
Yeah.
Whatever has re-energized him, or just whatever has allowed him to lock in, whether it's playing with Johnston and Stankoven, and I like calling him the captain in the kids line as a Jimmy Buffett fan.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, that's tomorrow's just a day away, baby. But if Jamie Benn is now getting to this level of hockey, that third line, if you want to call it that third line, before we thought there were matchup problems, and they did expose matchup problems on the road for teams with the depth of forwards, but they do look completely different now because Jamie Benn seems to have really ticked up and is playing his best offensive productive hockey of the season so far. Once again, we'll see how it looks against Edmonton and Colorado and Winnipeg. It's one thing to do it against San Jose, in Seattle, and even Arizona, even though that game started out a little weird. But if that third line now gets into the rhythm, that really does set up a lot for them to expose matchup problems in whoever they draw in the first. Well, whoever they draw for the course of the playoff run. How brutal was Vegas' third line last year that Dallas couldn't deal with them?
Yeah.
How brutal was Tampa's third line when they went to their 3 Cup finals and won 2? That's the biggest thing I think we all look at now when we say the word depth is those third lines that championship teams seem to have that provide major matchup problems for whatever team's on the other side. So you're taking Wyatt Johnston, I'll take Jamie Benn.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick, Brian. And, I've raised my hand and I've actually brought up that it's amazing that the contracts of Benn and Sagan haven't been talked about as much as they were, because it was a talking point within the Stars community because, these guys on the downside, but maybe it was the players surrounding them. And when you obviously have a Marchman and a Duchesne and a Wyatt Johnston and then add a Stankoven and before that a Dadonov, Those are pretty talented players, and they certainly can make you look better too. It kind of reminds me of Dustin Brown, what happened to him in LA, where everyone thought that, Dustin Brown's done, it's a bad contract. His last few years, he got put with some good players on a line, and we kind of saw a resurgence in his game as well before he retired.
Well, I feel like every team, I'll say every team in a playoff spot, every team has a questionable contract.
Sure.
That's just life under the salary cap. There's always going to be a contract where you're like, boy, if that was just a little bit different and we had a little more flexibility. I do think with the Seguin and Ben contracts, first of all, asked and answered. I mean, for years, it's the contracts aren't disappearing. They're not going anywhere. I do wonder if sometimes, we've just come to the realization of this is the reality of that we're living in. So just stop complaining about it, stop doing whatever, because they're not going away. The improved player, I'll say the improved production, because from a fan standpoint, I feel like we tie a lot of the numbers we always tie together, the production numbers compared to the contract number. Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin have clearly found a resurgence and a second wind to increase their production. And part of it's Peter DeBoer coming in and trying to loosen the reins a little bit on the offense. But I also think I'm a nerd for the economics of the game. And even though the cap has stayed flat because of the COVID effects coming out of everything, that hasn't changed the fact that players are getting AAV salary cap raises. So now when you look around and you're like, well, all right, McKinnon's in the double digits, Pettersson in Vancouver's now in the double digits, Crosby's contract is coming up, what's going to be his number? More players have signed those heavier AAV contracts, so maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin were signing their contracts, they were the top 5% or whatever it was of AAV. Well, now they're no longer in the top 5%. That population has grown with other players signing those contracts. Maybe it's like safety in numbers a little bit. They're no longer one of 10 or 15 guys. They're now one of 20 guys, that are above 9, or one of 25 guys that are above 9. So it's, time has sort of shifted, I think, the landscape a bit. But then, lastly, winning cures everything.
Yeah.
When you're trying to fight for the last wild card spot and you're ripping off 90 or 10 fingernails to get it, it's easier to complain about a contract as opposed to when you're sitting at the top of the Central and have an outside chance to get the President's Trophy.
No, you're absolutely right. And finally, I've been dealing with this, and I need some advice. How do you deal with a Stanley Cup defenseman as your co-host?
He's awesome. What are you talking about?
Well, yours is.
Yeah.
No, yours is. I'm talking about mine.
What, are you trying to get me to throw Luddy under the bus when he's not here to defend himself? Come on.
Yes, please.
No, absolutely not.
I just feel like I need someone to drop the gloves with me, and I just figured the comparison would work.
How about multi-Stanley Cup defenseman for you?
Yeah.
Like that's, you can. What's the Patrick Waugh line? Like, you can chirp Luddy all you want, but he couldn't hear you because he's got the 2 Stanley Cup rings in his ears. Does Luddy have a third? Did he get 1 or 2 when he was in Montreal?
2. He's got 2.
Yeah, so he's got 2 in his ears, and he's got a backup.
Yeah, 2 Stanley Cup champions, 2 NCAA championships. Yeah. How he's not retired at University of North Dakota is beyond me. 17 years in the league. And, listen, I'm just asking for advice. I've offered to drop the mitts. He won't do it. So, I'll take the instigator.
I've always said this working with Seven. Like, I will never out-chirp Seven. It'll never happen.
He's a great chirper.
He's too well trained. He's too quick for me. But I've always told him, I am going down swinging in a blaze of glory. Like, if we got into a chirp fest, I already know what the outcome is. But I'm getting as many licks in as I can before I ultimately succumb, and I just get pulled underwater.
Yeah, well, listen. For one, I love the chemistry between you guys. I think it's terrific, and I think
fun.
You guys do. You guys do a great job. I love the back and forth between you guys, whether it's at the AAC or in the studio. You do a heck of a job, man. So keep it up. Thanks for being a friend of the program, and I will see you at the dog park sometime soon, my friend. We haven't seen each other in a while.
No, we haven't, but we're finally getting some decent weather here once all the rain blows through, so it should be a good time. But hopefully not too much time there because we've got a Stanley Cup playoff run to come.
Yeah, let's meet there in like July or something.
Yes, exactly, when it's too hot.
Thanks so much to Brien Rea of Bally Sports Southwest. I'm Gavin Spittle of Spits and Suds, 105.3 The Fan. Have a great day, everyone.